Good to see you all here this afternoon. My name is Steve Davis. I'm our literary curator here at the Wittliff Collections. I'm delighted to welcome you all this afternoon as we celebrate Bill Broyles with the great assist from his good friend Stephen Harrigan. I've seen many of our Wittliff friends here today, and for those of you who have been here before, welcome back. Those of you who are here for the first time, congratulations on finding this place. I know it's not always easy. Yeah. So this photograph you see here was taken by our founding donor, Bill Wittliff. This is in the mid-1990s, about the time that Bill Broyles was getting nominated for an Academy Award for the Apollo 13 screenplay. And Bill Wittliff, as many of you know, was an extremely gifted photographer. And he had a hell of a vision, you might say. And his vision for the Wittliff Collections is what makes this place special. For nearly 40 years now, we've championed the cultural arts of this region by collecting and preserving the works of leading writers, photographers, musicians, filmmakers. We share these archives with our students and the world. We are here to nourish scholarship, to promote greater appreciation for the spirit of place of the Southwest, and to inspire creativity. I will tell you that over the years, I've had a chance to visit every major archive at every significant university in Texas and the Southwest. And never have I encountered a single person at any of those universities who's ever expressed any jealousy about Texas State University's football program. But they do envy the Wittliff Collections and our high-level acquisitions, our vibrant public programs, our flourishing book series. This was the vision that Bill and Sally Wittliff had, and that's what puts us in a class of our own. Yeah, thank you, Bill and Sally. Many of you are donors to the Wittliff, and you've helped make these successes possible. We thank you, and we are grateful for your support. And any of you who would like to join them and become also donors and support the Wittliff, I want to point out that our new, wonderful Major Gifts Officer, Maggie Gilberg, is here today, and hope you get a chance to say hi to her. There you are, Maggie. Hello. We're so delighted to have her. So, as probably almost all of you know, I hope, this month marks the 50th anniversary of Texas Monthly. We are all literally surrounded at this moment by a wonderful exhibition showcasing the spectacular art that has appeared in the magazine over the years. So what do you think? Isn't this beautiful? I mean, such great treasures. We can thank Mike Levy for this. For this material comes from the Texas Monthly Archive that Mike donated here in 1994. That archive has been growing in the years since with additional donations to sustain it. And Mike, thank you very much. We're very grateful to you. And I also just want to do a shout out to our three very talented staff members who curated this exhibition that you see in this room. We have our managing archivist, Katie Salzman, our photography curator, Carla Ellard, and our project archivist, Susanna Broyles. Can you guys just kind of stand up and wave? There's Susanna, Katie, Carla. Thank you. So for this exhibit, we will have another event, Sunday, April 2nd. There's a QR code you can scan near the front to RSVP. You'll also get an email about that. And we will have Greg Curtis here giving remarks, and we'll be joined by many of the artists and photographers that day as well. So keep that in mind. The Wittliff Collections has a great affinity with Texas Monthly. We share a lot of common history with the magazine, and so many of the individual writers who are associated with the magazine too have donated their literary papers here. Some of those are Gary Cartwright, we have his material, Dick Revis, Joe Nick Petoskey, Beverly Lowry, Jan Reed, Helen Thompson, John Graves, and Larry L. King, not to mention Steve Harrigan and Bill Broyles. It's quite an honor roll there. And so I'd like now to turn to introducing our two distinguished guests today. First up, Stephen Harrigan. What? I like it. Steve is one of the all-time great writers from Texas. He's also known to occasionally dabble in art. As you can see from this charming self-portrait. Thank you for this, Elizabeth. And you can see that Steve clearly made the right choice to embrace writing as his career. He is one of the most beloved and admired writers working in Texas, the author of a dozen acclaimed books of fiction and nonfiction, including his latest excellent novel, The Leopard is Loose. Steve is such a generous spirit while also being very tough-minded. Somehow he remains modest and humble despite abounding with superhuman talents. And, you know, here at the Wittliff Collections, I meet with a lot of writers regularly, all the time. And I can tell you that the level of respect for Steve Harrigan is off the charts. People consider him not just one of the best we have in Texas, but one of the best we've ever had. And Steve, as I mentioned a moment ago, is a major donor to the Wittliff Collections. His entire literary papers are here. And Steve, we're so grateful to you for your support through the years and for being here this afternoon. Thank you. And some of you may have noticed we have this exhibition up right now in our literary area. This is our long-awaited chance to show off some of the jewels in the William Broyles papers. This is one of the largest, richest collections we have here, close to 300 boxes in all donated by Bill to this university, beginning in 1989 and continuing up until, last I checked, about 2 weeks ago. And by way of introducing you to Bill, I'm just going to take us on a quick spin through this exhibit. Bill was the founding editor at Texas Monthly at age 28. That magazine was widely expected to fail within the first 6 months. Instead, it thrived and won a National Magazine Award for General Excellence in its first year. That was an unprecedented accomplishment for any new publication, and soon Texas Monthly was booming, becoming the institution that has ruled ever since. This, by the way, is another masterful photograph by Bill Wittliff, taken in 1976. And I just want to tell you, Bill Wittliff and I had several conversations over the years about Bill Broyles' tenure at Texas Monthly, because we both admired it so damn much. And one of the things that Wittliff said to me that really stuck with me, he said that Broyles was always a half step ahead of the rest of Texas. If he'd been a full step ahead, Wittliff said, he would have lost everybody. If he'd simply been in step, the magazine wouldn't have been interesting enough to matter. So he had just that gift for being a half step ahead of everybody. And Bill Broyles, as many of you know, has often downplayed his journalistic experience prior to joining the magazine. He says things like, I could never get hired there today, and stuff like that. But if you've had a chance to look at the exhibition, you know that Bill's career in journalism began long before Texas Monthly. After growing up in Baytown, Bill went on to Rice University. He had a very influential writing professor and mentor there. Some of you may recognize this gentleman. Yeah. Larry Mimritry. So much happened for Bill during his years at Rice. He met lifelong friends and colleagues. He became the student body president. But it was not all fun and games for Bill at Rice. There was the obligatory date with the president's daughter at a Rice football game. And you'll notice this is one of those very rare photographs of Bill without his famous smile. And we don't know if that's because Rice was getting thrashed 31-0, or if it's because, Bill was against the Vietnam War, and here he is with LBJ's daughter. After graduating, Bill went on to become a prestigious Marshall Scholar studying at Oxford, where he earned his master's degree in politics, philosophy, and economics. And guess what happened to Bill after graduating with his master's from Oxford? Yeah, he got drafted. Sent to Vietnam. He became a Marine lieutenant. And you'll see he's writing in a notebook here. And one of the things we have on exhibit from his archives is a notebook that's labeled on the front, To Vietnam, 1969. Here's Bill with his platoon. He was 24 years old, in charge of a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds. And as he has pointed out, we were all just a bunch of kids. Yeah. We're going to circle back to Vietnam in a moment, but I'm going to just jump ahead a couple of years and go right into Texas Monthly. This is Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson at the LBJ Library in December 1972. Johnson had just delivered a speech here, and what I want to ask is, can you spot the Texas Monthly writer in this crowd? Might it be the gentleman with the long hair and a gold turtleneck, wearing a press pass he somehow wrangled, working on a story for the upcoming debut issue of Texas Monthly? And it was a month after this photo was taken that first issue of Texas Monthly hit the streets. And Lyndon Johnson dropped dead that same week. And it was just a coincidence as far as we know. One of the many wonderful pieces in Bill's Texas Monthly papers is this lovely group photograph of the magazine's staff back in the day. And I think some of you in this photograph are here today. Yeah, if you're in this photograph, would you mind just standing up? So, Greg, Mike, can you guys stand up? Cool. Yes. Wonderful. There's so much great Texas Monthly material in Bill's archives. Dozens and dozens of boxes filled with correspondence, interoffice memos, edited manuscripts. You really get a front row seat to the magazine's early history, and you can see firsthand how Bill worked his magic with so many writers, pushing and challenging them to do their best work. Bill had a hell of a great run at the magazine. By the time he left in 1980, it was considered one of the top publications in the country. And at this point, I need to tell you that I have a dear old friend here at Texas State. He's a distinguished professor emeritus, and I mentioned him a few months ago. He asked, what's going on at the Wittliff? I said, we're doing this new exhibition on Bill Broyles. And his response was, Bill Broyles, whatever happened to him after Texas Monthly? and I told him, well, there's this thing called Hollywood, And this is Bill along the Sea of Cortez doing some research for a little film he and his friend Tom Hanks wanted to make. Some of you have probably seen this. Here they are on the set together, and I will tell you that Tom Hanks had a damn good reason for wanting to hear what Bill Broyles had to say. The two men talked a lot about Bill's research, because Bill's not the kind of guy who will simply read a bunch of books and try to imagine what it must be like to be stranded on a deserted island. He's the kind of person who will go and live that experience. And when I talk to students here at Texas State, I like to point out that when you do firsthand research in an archive, rather than just simply relying on previously published secondhand sources, you're doing the equivalent of what Bill Broyles did by going to the Sea of Cortez. You're setting off on an adventure into the unknown, and you are going to make exciting firsthand discoveries, just as Bill did. And here's just a little bit from this current exhibit, showing off a few items from Castaway. And some of the letters that Bill and Tom Hanks exchanged over the 7 years that Bill worked on the screenplay. And this exhibit, and I just want to do this to give you a little perspective, this exhibit has 28 pieces from Bill's archive on exhibit from Castaway. That comes out of over 30 boxes full of material on Castaway that contain about 50,000 pieces of paper. So this gives you a sense of just how rich and extensive these archives are. And of course, along with Castaway and Apollo 13, Bill has scripted a number of major films, along with co-creating writing for the Emmy Award TV series China Beach. Bill has accomplished so much important work in TV and film that people have been known to stage Bill Broyles film festivals up there. So we're going to circle back to Vietnam here, and like many who served in the war, those experiences transformed Bill and have continued to haunt him. In 1984, he became the first combat veteran to return to that country. The U.S. had no diplomatic relations with Vietnam at the time, and Bill really didn't know what he might be getting into when he showed up. Here's another shot from the exhibition. This shows one of Bill's manuscript pages, his map of Ho Chi Minh City, and the reporter's notebooks he kept as he traveled through the country. And Bill had been sent to Vietnam as a kid, really, to make war on other kids. And he went back as a man looking for peace. Here he is with some of those he'd once fought against. In the end, Broyles wrote a moving account of his journey from war to peace, Brothers in Arms, which has become a classic book on Vietnam and its aftermath. And what I can tell you is that Bill Broyles has always been a brother in arms to all who've known him. And he's also that visionary leader who's always a half step ahead, peering around the next corner. We are so grateful to Bill for his support of the Wittliff collections and for trusting Texas State University with his creative legacy. We're thrilled to welcome you and Steve Harrigan both here today. Thank you.
So I'm facing your good ear and you're facing my good ear, right? We got that straight.
What?
Well, thank you everyone for coming. Can you hear in the back okay? That means yes? Okay. Okay. So, Bill, it's funny for me to hear the words the Wittliff, because we both knew Bill Wittliff and we know Sally.
Yeah.
And the idea that this is an institution now with a "the" in front of it is kind of strange to me, because, you know, for many years, you and I both talked to Bill about this is a kind of, as Steve was saying, this is not an institution, it's a vision that he had, and kind of an inspiration palace, you know, for people who want to be writers or photographers or artists or musicians or screenwriters to come here and see how this stuff happens, you know, and what was really striking to me, I don't know how many of you had a chance to see the exhibit of Bill's work yet, but please go check it out if you haven't had a chance, because I had the feeling as I was standing there the first time that if I had been, you know, 22 years old and had come into this place and seen this guy's journey, you know, from paperboy to whatever you are now, we'll talk about that. But it would have totally changed my life. And you must have really complicated feelings walking into that exhibit yourself, to see, you know, your own life on display like that, and to see the path you maybe inadvertently or deliberately taken. I don't know. What was your reaction when you saw it?
Wow. Well, it's surreal to go in there and it's 360 degrees of me. And I kind of felt like a great scene in Tom Sawyer when he and Huck Finn fake their death, and Tom Sawyer gets to watch his own funeral. Is this like my epitaph? And can there be one more case, please? You know, like I could fill. But just also to wind back, the Wittliff, it's the Wittliff. And Bill was one of my main inspirations besides Larry to do this, that made me feel like you could do something like this in Texas. I didn't have a Wittliff collection.
To do this, meaning your career.
To start Texas Monthly. I didn't know I was going to have a career. I didn't even know that the Texas Monthly was going to work, much less that I was going to have a career. But that, you know, while I was in there, there's a young Texas State University student. Brooklyn, are you here? Where are you? She's back there. A theater department student who says she comes here almost every day to get inspiration. And kids from Blanco or Corpus or Baytown can do that now. We couldn't do that. And as it is now, today, from the time that we were young to now, I mean, Texas Monthly, Austin City Limits are like two of the continuing creators of Texas culture, right? But the Wittliff is the repository of it. And to have a repository starts the cycle, right? You have the people who've created, and young people come in and think, I could do that. And it's very inspiring. It's very inspiring. The second thing, when I looked at it, it's the creative journeys of William Broyles. But as I look at it, I realize so many of those journeys have been joined with the journeys of lots of other people, like Texas Monthly, like China Beach, like my films. That's not just me. And I wouldn't be here if this crazy guy from Dallas hadn't wandered all over Texas, seen hundreds of people to start this magazine. And everybody thought he was insane. He said, "You're too young, you don't have enough money, you don't know what you're doing." Well, okay. Well, and so Mike, who was 25, and people were saying, "You're too young, you don't know what you're doing," he set out to prove them wrong, that he wasn't crazy. And so to prove he wasn't crazy, he went out and hired a 27-year-old guy with no experience who'd just gotten back from Vietnam to be the editor. And so, Mike, thank you.
Wittliff was the first person who told me that Texas Monthly would work.
Mike just said Bill Wittliff was the first one who told him Texas Monthly would work. So there you go. Here's the intersection here. And after Mike did this crazy thing, I went out and found and called my roommate from Rice, Greg Curtis, right here. It's my first staff person. And he went on to become the editor for 20 years, you know, after we thought it was going to be over in 6 months. And so thank you, too. And Dan, thank you. Dan's the current editor of Texas Monthly, who is making sure that that institution, as a beautiful, amazing magazine, a key part of Texas, is continuing. So thanks to you and Randa and all the people who are helping that. So the other thing I want to do is that Steve, you inspired me, is Texas Monthly is now the creative journeys of so many people enjoined here. And it expresses what we started is now way beyond what we ever imagined. So I would like anybody here who worked for Texas Monthly, who's written for it, taken photographs for it, anything else, to just please stand up. So thanks to all of you. That's how I want to start, by just saying thank you.
So it's the 50th anniversary of Texas Monthly this year, and it's the 50th anniversary of you and me being friends, me and Bill and Mike being friends,
Yeah.
Greg and Mike being friends. And so it was like, I think, 1972. I had heard about this magazine that was starting, and somehow I got connected with Greg Curtis, and we had lunch, and he gave me an assignment. I guess that you must have vetted because you were the editor-in-chief. And we were...
Maybe.
We had gone...
He would go off and do things that we not.
But we had gone to lunch, and I just met Greg, and we were walking down Guadalupe Street toward the office, which was at 15th and Guadalupe.
Right.
And here comes this guy in the other direction. And Greg said, "Oh, Steve, have you met Bill?" And so, Bill, you put out your hand, and I shake your hand. Did I ever tell you what my first thought was when I met you?
No.
This guy's going to be president.
Oh, yes.
And I had underestimated you at that point. But you had such presence and magnetism and confidence. And I only later learned that you were faking some of that. That it was a kind of a rough go the first couple of months. Can you just talk a little bit about the beginnings of Texas Monthly? And you and I both wrote about it a little bit in this new issue. But
Well, it was, and that's kind of the theme of a lot of what we'll talk about is that looking back now, it all seems like it was all meant to be. But we were a kind of merry band of very few people putting out this magazine. It was just in this tiny office with bats flying in and out, and it was touch and go. As Mike reminded me, if the printer hadn't forgotten to bill us, because we were such a small client, we would have gone bankrupt at the first year. But Mike had this view that it would work, and his passion was contagious. And I thought, and when I called Greg, people I called, I would say, listen, if you have a job, don't quit it. But if you don't have much to do and you want something interesting to do for 6 months or so, come on and we'll have fun, and then we'll go do something else. And I wasn't kidding, because we just, we had no idea it was going to work. So part of it was there was no roadmap, and there was no responsibility on our shoulders. There was no institution we were trying to maintain or keep going. There were no expectations. We were able just to make it up. We just had the best time, right? We had the best time. It was so fun. Because no one else was doing it. We were blazing our own trail, and we didn't, in Texas, of all places, to be able to do a magazine. I mean, my gosh, you could just walk out your door, and there's a story everywhere. And we had so much low-lying fruit at the beginning, it was almost like, do this, do that, oh my God. And the one thing we knew we wanted, that we never strayed from, is we're not going to be some provincial magazine that's okay. Okay? We're going to be as good as anybody, because we can. Nobody, if anybody who was established had looked at us, they said, no, you can't. But we did. And what everybody told us we couldn't do, and what they told Mike we couldn't do, we did. Because we just did. I don't know else how to say it. It was fun. And I think I mentioned this. We finally got the first issue together. It was 80 pages. Is that right? 80 pages, like that. And 84. Okay, whatever it was, doesn't matter. It was about the size of Steve's notes. And we went to Schultz's, and we were celebrating. We found a few typos and this and that, and we were thinking, oh my God. And Greg looked at me and he said, you mean we have to do this again? And so we have it. It's 600 issues from them. And again, thanks to Dan and all of you who are here from the current staff, I'm looking forward to 50 more years of it. So it was, again, I think it was the reverse of what I was just talking about, because there wasn't these layers of culture lying over us and weighing on us, and it was a frontier.
Yeah.
It was, Texas was opportunity, the way it's been for generations of people in all other areas. And I think it was uniquely accepting of us and of this something new that you might not find in a more established place like New York or as we found in California.
Well, and the doors were open to people like me and other writers and photographers and illustrators and editors who had no experience either. So, I mean, it was one of those combustible moments where everything was possible, it seemed like.
Well, and Steve had this company called Coronado's Children's Precision Lawn Mowing Team. And that's how he was supporting himself. And he was cutting my yard and writing for Texas Monthly. And then we thought, we better raise our freelance rates as soon as we can.
Yeah, I did a lot better with the yard mowing.
Oh, I beg to differ. You would not. No, I was equally glad to have you write more for the magazine and to get a different yard man.
Yeah, edging was not my strength.
No, it was.
And you had a bigger yard than I did. So yours was a $20 yard.
I know. Oh, gosh.
So let's kind of cast it back a ways to Baytown.
Okay.
When you were growing up, you can see Bill's Boy Scout badges in the exhibit. You can see his, that picture that Steve showed of him, as a paper boy with the Baytown Sun. So let's just talk about, I'd like to talk about both what it was like where you grew up and what you dreamed or not dreamed or imagined yourself to be when you were when you were an adult? What, did you have any vision for yourself or any agenda?
You know, my world was so small then. It was, Baytown, where I grew up, is refinery town. And at the time, it was the largest refinery in the world. And people lived in company housing. There was a company baseball team. They had a company picnic every year that everybody came to. And it was its own world. It was self-contained. And I-10 had not been built. It was really its own place. And it was, I was the paper boy. And you saw that photograph. And on my route, I would stop and I could see, there was, at the point, we looked in Burnett Bay and it looked up to the San Jacinto Monument of Texas history and the ship channel. And at night, you know, all the plants would light up like this city of, it was like, kind of like Saturday Night Fever when they're looking at New York from New Jersey, you know, just, it was like, whoa, that's something beautiful. And ships would be going by and I remember I would, almost every day, I would stop at that point and look at the ships. And I would think, I don't know where you're going, but wherever you're going, I want to go. I want out. I want to go there. At the same time, I just loved Baytown. And I had a stamp collection, you know, those days, it was all those old countries that don't exist, Sarawak and Borneo, and I've always wanted to go to there. And so I didn't know where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do, except that I wanted to be an engineer like my father. And I got to Rice, and you have to take Math 100 to continue in engineering, and my father aced it. And we all carry slide rules like gunslingers on our belt. We pull them out and slides. And on my first test, I made a 4 or 5 out of 100. And I failed Math 100 freshman year. And I came home with my slide rule and I bent it over my knee and I hung it from my ceiling. And some nights I would wake up and I'd see my father standing at the door and just looking at it. Because he had already had this Broyles and Sons sign made up for the engineering thing. And but so many of these things are things you realize later, okay? What I didn't realize then, that those people at the refinery, had developed jet aviation fuel, which helped win World War II. B, had produced like 60% of the tooling, which was in TNT, so if you were bombed or blown up in World War II, that was Baytown. And 3, all of my parents' friends almost all were working in this brand new industry, derivative from oil, of plastics. And they thought they were saving the world. They thought they were Prometheus bringing fire to man. These miracles would make everyone's life better in every way, easier, more, and just as oil had. And to see the irony of that go from then to now, to where all the miracles of oil and the miracles of plastic, we realize actually have a price. You know, we don't know what or how we can do it, but it's just, can I just carry this idea a little further?
Sure.
So the 2 photographs in there that I'm thinking about are the paper boy, right? And the one of me in Vietnam. Because I didn't know I was going to be here, right? You know, if people ask, well, what do you plan? How do you plan your life? And at this point in my life, I look back, and instead of making sense, it all seems so much more mysterious. I mean, I remember, speaking of failing Math 100, the next time I felt like such a failure was I was in Vietnam on a mountaintop with my platoon. You see those pictures of those kids, you can see how young they are. And we were on this bombed out mountaintop, and I was thinking, wow, all my friends from Oxford are finishing their law degrees, or they're working at Goldman Sachs, or they're joining the Foreign Service, or they're going on to this big success, and I'm on a mountaintop in Vietnam with a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds, and that's going to be it. End. And I'd gone into the hospital one time and seen a nurse there, and marveled at how she had been able to take care of all these wounded teenagers. In fact, I was I fainted dead away. That was my one war injury. I broke my nose feigning in the hospital. And then one night and I saw this light streak across the sky, and it's only from this perspective that I realized that nurse was the inspiration for China Beach, and that light streaking across the sky was Apollo 13. I mean, it would have been better if the helicopter had come in and Mike Levy had stepped off with his magazines and said, but you don't see those patterns. You don't see the opportunity. You don't see where things are going to be going. And that's part of what I realized. First is how my creative journeys have not been alone. And the second is how unplanned all of this is. It looks like when you look at it from now, it looks like, oh, he went from here to here to here to here, and that makes sense and all that. And what is left out is the case of all the failures where I went the wrong place, where I stepped in the hole, where things didn't go right, where I thought my life, career was over. That's a missing case.
But that's the crucial link too, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
because the failures are what I think make us who we are, that test us. And we have to go back out, and what do they say in basketball, that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take? And it's just taking chances. And I took a chance with Mike, and we took a chance with, I went to Newsweek. Why would I, in my right mind, do that? I was the last person that would like that. I took a chance going out to LA and didn't know what was going to happen. And so it's a mysterious thing where you think, how does this all work? Because it's not me. I can't take credit for planning this. It's just one thing happened after another. And some of them worked out and others didn't. And that's what goes into, I guess, a life, right? I mean, but it's not just the high points. It's all the places in between. It's the mountaintops and the mud. It's the being bankrupt at 40 or 50, however old I was. It was living with my parents at 50 because I was broke. You don't see that here. And Brooklyn, wherever you are, don't forget that, okay? Because you're gonna try and you're gonna fail sometimes, but don't just, you can do it. You got it.
So Bill, you and I have written 3 or 4 screenplays together, and they're all failures.
Well, there you go. They go in that case.
All right.
They're going to go in that case.
But it's interesting to think about. We sold 1, but we haven't. They're misfires so far. But the idea that experience is utterly crucial to your success is really what this exhibit's all about, and it's that connectedness of these various seemingly random parts of your life that adds up to a really cohesive journey, and it's family connectedness too, because Susanna was part of putting this exhibit together, your daughter, and your daughter Katie is here, and your sister Betsy, and I mean, it's
Steve, you put me to shame. I should have introduced you all.
Oh no.
Susanna, thank you. Betsy, you're still my favorite sister. Katie, you inspire me, and also Nancy, you came to me just at the right time.
So anyway, but didn't mean to put you to shame.
I mean,
Another failure.
No. Well,
We've learned from our failures.
Exactly.
But no, I mean, it's those, and I've known your kids since the beginning, and it's those that sort of deep texture of family connections and sort of the way your children in particular sort of integrated into your own career, into various aspects of your own career, whatever they're doing, whether it's filming or writing screenplays or working as Susanna does in an archive, or making movies, or skiing, or whatever. I mean, it's really fascinating to watch this new generation. And I'm also very curious about Texas and what it's meant to you, because, as you said, you were desperate to get out of there, meaning Baytown, and yet you're always desperate to come back. And so there's this, to some degree, you defined Texas during your tenure as Texas Monthly's editor-in-chief, and you've left it behind, you've come back again, now you're back, maybe for good, maybe not, nobody can pin you down. But yeah, you grew up with inside, as you said, of the San Jacinto Monument. You absorbed Texas history, you absorbed Texas culture in a way that few other people have. So is there a way to define your connection with your home state?
Wow, that's such a good question. I think it's in my blood,
Now, tell us how far back it goes, too, because I know it goes really far back.
well, this is actually a story that shows my business acumen that I've inherited, too. Well, right after the Civil War, my ancestor William Doherty came from Tennessee with his wife Nancy and settled in Dripping Springs, which was then the frontier, because during the Civil War, all the forces had been withdrawn and the Comanches had come closer. And Nancy died in childbirth as they were leaving, my legend is, on a wagon, and she's buried in Austin here in 1867 along with the child. And her surviving son James moved to Missouri. They started a tin mine. And in 1901, his lawyer came to him and said, they've discovered oil in Spindletop in Beaumont in Texas. We should go down there because this mine is a loser, I'm telling you. And so James said, I've been to Texas. My mother died there. I'm never going back, and I'm going to make this tin mine work. And you're a fool to go down and waste your life and your career on this hokum of oil. His lawyer's name was Howard Hughes. And that's pretty much sums up the Broyles kind of tradition of really getting us being one half step behind, as Steve would have said. But, I went through to get that plot, because I want to be buried there. And not now, but later. But every place I go, it's like, why don't I try this? Why don't I try California? Or why don't I try New York? Why don't I try California again? Why don't I come back? But it's always circling, like the ospreys that when I lived in Wyoming would come every spring to their nest, and it was really that kind of cyclical thing. I'm always coming back because this is where my roots are. And I came back, I'd just gotten back in Texas when Mike found me, and it was the start of that cycle. And I think there's a restlessness, if you want to say that frontier restlessness, that my daughter Susanna, who's our family archivist too, tells me is in our family. They're always packing up, going someplace beautiful and making it beautiful more, and then packing up and going to someplace else, like Eden, Texas, if anybody's been there. That's where a lot of my family is from, and it's not Eden, but they made the most of it. I really think that if you look at my work, that kid, the paper boy on the point, the connection between him and Tom Hanks as Chuck standing at the crossroads in Castaway is pretty exact. It's like, where do I go next? Where's my home? These, like Castaway, Apollo 13, Polar Express, they're all kind of the Odyssey in structure, right? You leave home, you run into all these adventures, and you come back. And that's the structure of that. And it's, where is the home? Where is my home? It's somewhere here. I'm circling around, but it's not in California, and it's here, and it's with people I love. That's where it is. But it's a mystery. You know, it's a mystery. You talked about Castaway when I went to the island, and to live like Chuck does, and I was there for 2 weeks, and everything in the movie you see, I did. You know, I had to open a coconut, I had to find water, I had to find shelter, I had to sharpen sticks and speared stingrays, and I was eating raw stingrays, which not recommended. And you know, there was another island across the way, but it was called Tiburon Island, and Tiburon means shark. And the whole channel was just hammerhead sharks swimming back and forth, so I thought, I don't think I'm going to go there. But I needed one thing, I needed fire, and I could not make it. All those things, Boy Scout badge, I don't care, they don't work, all this stuff. And I had blisters on my hand, it was all bloody, and I got these Mormon survivalists who were taking me there and were like 2 sand dunes away. And one morning, I was eating my raw stingray, and the wind changed, and I could smell the bacon from their cooking. And I could hear the Grateful Dead, you know, kind of trucking, like, and I thought, what am I doing? So I went over and said, I give up. I'm dead. I'm dead. But so how do you make fire? So they showed me that method. I made fire. I cooked the stingray, still not recommended. And I was lying there looking at the stars, and I thought, I've got the movie. It's like man's progression from primitive man to fire. And then, so I thought, well, I'll stay for a little bit longer, and I was lying there, and I just said, now that I had all that, I was lonely. I thought, I am so lonely, I'm going to go talk to these guys. No, I can't do that. And one morning, I went down to the beach, and this is really my life in a nutshell, and the tide had brought in a volleyball. And I picked it up, I looked at it, and I thought, threw it away. And that night, I was just lying there, and I thought, and I picked up the volleyball, I got some seaweed and some shells, and I started talking to it. Hey, Wilson, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming. Let's hang out by the fire. I've got a fire right over. And I thought that was cute. And then as I thought, wait, idiot, that's the movie. That's the movie. We need connection. We need to be with other people, even other consciousness, even if we have to make them up. And that was one key realization of the movie. And the other one was, how does he get off? And I had all these ideas, like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue comes to take pictures. The Tide Pirates pick him up. And I thought, no, he has to get off himself. So finally figured that out. But then I just wanted, don't ask me why. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but the scene is, he's lost Wilson, the storm has come and blown away his sails, his raft is in tatters, and he takes his oars, and he's sitting there, and he just lets them go. And I thought, that to me is the great moment of the movie, because he turns himself over to the ocean and to fate, or whatever, the God, consciousness, and he has acceptance. And that's when he sees his first other real consciousness, which is a whale. I didn't want it to be a person, it was a whale. It's a whole other consciousness that, and I remember the studio didn't want to do the whale. It's too expensive. So they said, how about a dolphin? Can he see a dolphin? I said, sure, and the dolphin has a ball and it has Wilson. I said, he's throwing Wilson. So we all went in, Tom Hanks and Bob Zemeckis, wearing Save the Whale T-shirts. And we got the top quarter of the whale, so we got that. But that, and again, in some of the things that I'm doing now, that speaks to me really strongly too. You know, but again, a lot of this is just the tide brings something in, you know, and on we go.
So you just use the expression, "That's the movie," as a discovery moment, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, we got to turn this over to the audience in a second, but let me ask this last question. If this were a movie about Bill Broyles instead of an exhibit in the other room, and you had to find that theme, you know, what's the movie? Do you think you could find it? Do you think there's enough of an overarching theme to make a credible story?
I don't know how you make a movie about just a really, really lucky guy. That's how I feel.
So, well, that's a theme. We have time for audience questions, I think, David and Steve. So, and I think there are roving.
Let me mention, we have a couple of student workers who have handheld mics who will come and would like to read your question.
There's one here from Gregory Curtis.
Uh-oh.
So this is actually a question for Mike Levy. And and it's something I've always wondered, and it's very pertinent to this. You went to interview Bill. He was working for the school board.
Houston School Board.
In Houston, and you came away, and maybe not immediately, but you ended up hiring him. He had virtually no experience. What did you see in Bill that led you to hire him?
Well, let's go back.
This should be good.
Bill and I talk about, basically we're saying the same thing about magic, a higher power, wanting there to be a magazine. One of the things I haven't told Bill is my meeting Bill was a momentary conversation with somebody that Bill went to college with, Hugh Rice Kelly. Hugh Rice was editor of the Law Review at UT, and I said in passing, I'm trying to start a magazine. He said, you need to meet Bill Broyles. That conversation was maybe 60 seconds. So I had been talking to 300 people. I had asked each of these 300 people, well, not all 300 were interested for other reasons, which were rational. I needed a resume to see where you've been with your life. I needed to see a sample of your writing, and I needed a letter, a Dear Mike letter, on how the individual saw this magazine and how he saw Texas. And of all the people I talked to, Broyles was the only one who got it. A chunk of it was DNA, fifth generation Texan. Chunk of it was soul. But one of the things he and I haven't talked about is he came out of the Marine Corps as a leader. And as Greg knows, Bill was a leader of youngsters who had never done this before. He believed, and his belief was infectious, and he, as he said, we made it up, but he was the leader who knew how to make it up and inspire other people to take advantage of that. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I think there's a question here. I don't know. Yeah, sorry, and then we'll get to.
Well, I come to this a little bit late, and I didn't really understand until going through the exhibit that you were responsible for China Beach. And just last week, I happened to go back and see an episode of China Beach. And in that episode, the nurse is dancing with the man in the wheelchair. And that to me, that conveyed so many different layers of what was going on in Nam at that time, the helplessness of everything. Then where do we go from here when all this is over? Nobody had a clue. And then when you just mentioned about the Castaway turning loose of the oars, that was complete surrender. He turned it over to whatever it was, and I think that was a powerful message in that. But thank you for all of that, because it all comes together like you said.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say it really is special to have so many generations of Texas Monthly here in this room today. And that's really special. And I wanted to talk a little bit, get your reaction about some nuts and bolts of what you were doing. And it actually, you both wrote wonderful essays in the February issue of Texas Monthly. Both wonderful. On page 200, Mr. Harrigan, you were talking about the 1980s, and you wrote, "The work was consuming, consequential, and fun, and the pay wasn't bad, thanks to Mike's fervent belief that Texas Monthly would be a better magazine if its contents relied more on salaried staff writers than on financially frantic freelancers." Now, I'm one of those financially frantic freelancers. I want to know what the hell. That's it.
Well, that I can answer something too, because I've been a financially freelancer for the last 35 years, and there's many things that we can talk about. But
We've got time.
and I also want to thank the gentleman for his comment about China Beach. That sure means a lot to me, and also, of course, thank Mike for those really kind words.
Yeah, we've all, I mean, there are I actually had a salary for 10 years of my life. The rest has been freelance, so we all understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Wait,
Somebody in the back, too.
okay, we'll leave it to you.
Yes, quickly. Bill, a couple of years ago, you gave a talk
Wait, who's
up the
talking?
road. And it was about the power of narrative and how you had arrived at that sort of vision of or way of expressing life and the power of it in our culture. And you've, in essence, become one of the great storytellers in the nation. So I just wondered if is that what you eventually evolved toward, storytelling and myth and narrative in our culture?
Wow, that is such a good question. I think that's what this is all about. I realize, when I see it, it's all about me carrying the stories as a paper boy, and spreading them every day, to telling them, first in print and then in TV and then in film. And I mean, our religions are all based on stories. Advertisers say we've got a great story to tell. But I think it's also the stories of our lives, right? We are telling and living stories of our own life, and part of the amazing gifts we've been given is a platform to tell stories to people that might resonate with them. And there's something, in a way, it's a miracle of like, whatever I don't know what it is where one person's mind can connect to another person's mind over space. Well, that's what happens with a magazine, right? You pick it up and you're reading somebody else's mind, and somewhere else that we don't even know. It's a transmission of stories to others. And in film, it's even more powerful because you're creating something that's like life. It's very similar. The memories are, they're playing real people, and Chuck to me is a real person because I see him on the screen. And if you go to a theater, it's one of the most amazing experiences of my life is to sit in a movie theater, like in a test screening, like on Castaway, for example, And the audience comes, and then Tom Hanks and Bob Zemeckis and I come in at the end, and at the beginning, when the lights go down, and sit in the back, and we watch the movie with them. And they have focus groups, and they do all these things, they fill out cards. We don't pay any attention to that. It's just the feeling of sitting there of like this collective consciousness of an audience. And you know instantly, this thing's not working, right? It's got to go. In Castaway, it was a scene at FedEx office in Memphis. That was the whole reason I'd done it, because I'd researched it. I'd done the sword at Christmas. I'd been there. We'd filmed it. It was incredibly difficult. It took 2 weeks. And we watched the audience, and they'd already out. You know, that sense of a story that people at the same time are all living. Because when you write, you know, people read it at different times and usually in their privacy. But when you do a film, and it's not even TV doesn't do this, but a film, when you sit in a theater, everyone's experiencing the same story. And that happens, I guess, in churches and plays and all kinds of things. But yeah, the power of story is another mystery to me. It is who we are, right? Consciousness and storytelling are the same. Do we tell stories because we're conscious, or are we conscious because we tell? It's a mystery to me.
Hi, yes. I'm a fifth-generation Texan. My great-great-grandfather, Samuel Augustus Maverick, didn't brand his cattle. You're a
I've heard of him.
nonconformist and an individualistic type person. What about you living and being a part of Texas? What has made you a maverick of Texas?
I guess, well, if you say I am, that's an honor, and you know, and that's almost a synonym for Texan, isn't it? You know, that we are not afraid to take that other path. I think that's what it is. It's not afraid to fail. And sometimes it's not afraid to rustle other cattle, put your brand on it, take the credit. You know, I've done that before too. Thank you. That's a good question.
There's time left. What do you hope to accomplish next?
Like what's it, like the other blank box? That's what. Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I've been exploring lots of issues of mortality at this point in my life. My children have been speaking to me so eloquently, not just with their words, but with their lives, about how they're living and what that means. And as they become adults, you know, as they become parents, as they go off to war, I suddenly connect more to my parents. You know, as we see our children grow up, suddenly I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, my parents felt the same way probably, and their parents. So I'm trying to think of ways. I'm maybe writing some prose, or even if I'm lucky enough to find a metaphorical way to say this, because I've been doing all these pilgrimages. I've been to Santiago de Compostela. I've been recently to Auschwitz. I've been going to Hiroshima. I've been everywhere. And I've also been exploring kind of the frontier of the use of psychedelics and consciousness expansion, and then also in PTSD treatment and in end-of-life treatment. I think this is a really amazing frontier that the same day that Albert Hofmann discovered LSD in April 19th, 1943, was the same day Robert Oppenheimer convened the physicists at Los Alamos. And one is looking to the mysteries of the mind, and the other is looking to the mysteries of the atom. And I'm hoping that whatever the psychedelics can teach us and help us to reach a certain better level of consciousness can keep us ahead of what can be done with nuclear weapons or whatever. So yeah, that's what I'm interested in now, and it's a lot about this. You know, what does all this mean? I don't know. When you ask me the question, I honestly don't know. And does it mean, and that's...
I'm not even, but you're back on the desert island now. You're like, you know,
Oh, God,
for the last
that's
few
right.
years, you've been sort of camped out somewhere trying to discover what the movie is, right? I mean, you're
Oh my
looking,
God, that's right.
you're looking
You're
for,
right. You should be a writer.
oh, well, with your encouragement, Bill, I might take it up. But I mean, that is, I mean, I know you pretty well, I think, and you begin with a kind of inchoate research phase, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And you, during that process, you find what it is you're looking for. And so I'm really curious what this thing is going to be that you're exploring now, because I know you've been working on it or whatever it is.
Yeah, for a couple of years. Well, I'm still waiting for the volleyball to wash up on the beach. And I think that's the line in Castaway that keeps me going, is tomorrow the sun will rise, and who knows what the tide will break.
Ooh, we better end there, because that's too good to not to.
Thanks.
Bill,
Thank you,
thanks so
Steve.
much, Bill, and thanks
Thank you all.
everyone for Wittliff.